I'm Julie Goodgame. I'm with the City of Tyler's Communications Department. We received news yesterday from the EPA in regards to the consent decree that our City Council signed on November 9th at the City Council meeting. And so I'm going to speak with Ed Broussard, City Manager for the City of Tyler, to ask him some questions about what this means and what our next steps are. So Ed, can you talk to me a little bit about the process now that the EPA has signed? What are the next steps in that?
So the process that where we are now with the press release the EPA distributed yesterday this is now the comment period. So we have a 30-day comment period window that the EPA has where they solicit, typically through the media, for local citizens and other interested parties to be able to give them feedback in relationship to the consent decree that the City of Tyler approved with them back in November of last year. So if it's something to where citizens are like kind of dimly aware that there was something that they remembered about that's because for us back in November we had quite a bit of conversation and information distributed about it, a lot of which is still available. And so now the EPA is just now getting to their part of this and it's approving the consent decree and then doing the comment period.
The consent decree, what exactly is that, and what does the plan cover in terms of the City of Tyler's infrastructure?
So the consent decree is the result of nearly a decade of the City of Tyler really as far as fighting a legal battle with the Environmental Protection Agency in relationship to changing rules that they had on our wastewater collection system. This doesn't have anything to do with our water system. It doesn't have anything to do with even our wastewater treatment system. It has to do specifically with our wastewater collection system, which are the lines that we have that run underneath the ground.
And so over these last 10 years, what specifically are they taking issue with?
What they're specifically taking issue with has been the issue of infiltration into the system. And this is where tree roots have kind of typically kind of gone in and created and put in holes into our collection system and collection pipes. And then so you have infiltration of stormwater that's going through those as well as through our manholes that gets into the system. And then also with overflows that typically happen at our lift stations. And so what we have are lift stations that help kind of through gravity feed or push the water or the wastewater back through the line all the way to the treatment plant. And at these lift stations, there are times where wastewater may escape from those. Now typically lift stations are located in either remote areas or kind of off of the beaten path, away from neighborhoods. So it's nothing to where the people of Tyler are ever put in a unsafe condition.
So when you read over the consent decree, it looks like a lot of the SSOs, in addition to tree roots, are caused by fats, oils, and grease. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, grease has always been a constant issue in our wastewater collection lines. It is typically, even though you're always, even your mother recommended to you, don't pour grease down the drain. People still do. Grease still gets into the system. And with that grease that gets into the system, it gels, it compacts, it starts to form blockages. And that's been a very big issue that we've had for decades of grease causing these blockages that then our wastewater treatment or our wastewater staff go out and then just kind of plow through, kind of jet the blockages open so it kind of opens up again, but they typically don't find out about the blockages until the blockage occurs. And so with the new programs that we're going to have to be introducing, especially related to kind of fat, oil, and greases, or kind of FOG is the acronym that's put towards it, we're going to have to do quite a bit of improvements regarding our restaurants and pushing out more grease traps type of equipment. And we're also going to be doing more televising and kind of with that routine maintenance of our collection system lines in order to keep that grease from blocking the lines.
Okay, so let's talk about part of the EPA's press release. They alluded to fines, which we originally addressed back on November 9th. So can you talk to me a little bit about those fines and how we have planned to pay for them?
The fine that the EPA levied against us as part of their revenue scheme that they have, that's with their model. They have a large set part of their budget that they depend upon fining cities. And this has been kind of a pyramid system that they have, of where they started with some of the bigger cities like San Antonio, and finding them and finding issues and fault with their wastewater collection system, and then working their way down to now where they're to the mid-sized cities, and they probably will hope to continue then to the smaller cities, in just kind of taking them to task and really imposing rules that they could not get into law. So the fine that they have kind of set against us has been part of something we've been negotiating for years, just because they always intended to get their pound of flesh from the city of Tyler, and something versus something in regards to cash from us versus just kind of working with us to repair the system, or where there were issues that needed to be taken care of. So what we ended up with is kind of an agreed fine that is much smaller than the original fine that they began to negotiations with. In comparison to cities our size that have also gone through this process, we felt that we came out better than we could have been in relationship to their fine, and especially if we had ended up going through the full court process with them in regards to the pending litigation. The fine itself will be paid for out of our utility fees and bills, and that's something where we had started to put money away with our utility funds in order to pay towards the fine. And by the way, it doesn't just go to the EPA, it also goes to the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. They were kind of put in a position where they get money from us, as well as the Attorney General. Our Texas Attorney General, who really wasn't involved in this much, is also getting a cut from those fines. And so that's all been something that we have protested, especially on the state's part, because they should be in a role to better protect us than they have been doing. And it kind of shows a lot of the issues that cities have where we aren't getting support either at the federal level or at the state level. The days of where the cities were the backbones of our nation and supported by our federal government or state government seem to be over. You know, at no point in this process were we ever provided the opportunity to just work on the issues that they were identifying and not come away with some type of fine or penalty. The fine and penalty was always part of their solution to this issue, and in fact they spent more time really probably on the fine and penalty than they did on trying to help us work together to figure out what is a resolution to the complaints that they had.
And after we agreed on a fine with them, you said that this negotiation has been going on for 10 years. How quickly did things move after that fine was agreed upon? You know,
the negotiation process on this litigation held the city hostage to getting a lot of things underway that we are kind of very eager to do. And once the council was able to approve the consent decree in November, we began with the authorization of contracts for right-of-way maintenance, especially in a lot of our wooded areas that a lot of our wastewater lines run through. You began to see more manhole as far as inventories and improvements being done. There was work being done on just additional televising of lines and starting to kind of create a ongoing schedule. And one of the big components of the consent decree is a study that will probably take about a year long to complete, that will begin to look to understand and analyze where are there issues in our collection system, which, like I said, we've been eager to get started on. And so once the council was able to approve that, we began the process of getting that underway and having that study begin. So, you know, here it is kind of middle of January, and the EPA is getting to their part of the consent decree, but we wasted no time once we approved ours back in November.
We've looked over the consent decree. It seems like a lot of the components of that CMOM program, or that maintenance and operations program that's outlined in it, are actually things that we were doing prior to entering into negotiation with the EPA. Is that correct?
Yeah, a lot of their maintenance operation program that they have mandated, and by the way, they've mandated through their rules process, the CMOM process that is their maintenance and operations that they want municipal wastewater systems to go through was actually vetoed by President Bush and by Congress. This is not something where they're working under state law, federal law. This is something that a rule that they wanted to have pushed through that they were unable to do at the federal level, and thus are using the threat of litigation to push through these rules instead. Now, a lot of the things that are in there are good programs, and are programs that we either had underway are very compliant and fine with going with. Now, the issue we've had a lot of concerns with is sometimes the fines that they want to use and how they define things like sewer discharges and overflows, because of the case that they could, if there's just a drop of wastewater was to come out of, say, when you televise a line to hit the road, they would consider that a finable offense. And so it is something to where they've gone overboard on this. This is not the end of our fight with EPA. It will probably be something that will continue on for the foreseeable future as we kind of argue over the operation and maintenance of our system from a fine and penalty standpoint, as they look for where we have errors versus just to see how we can make improvements on the work that's being done.
And just to clarify, because I think a lot of our residents, they're used to us talking about the general fund and so taxpayer monies, but wastewater is different. It's part of an enterprise fund. And so can you speak to kind of where these monies come from and how that comes about, both for the upgrades to the system and also for those fines?
The upgrades to the systems and fines are all coming out of our water and wastewater fund, as you made mention of, our utilities fund. And our utilities fund is funded 100% by really the fees that we pay or that we charge our customers for their utility service. So utility service pays 100% of the service that they get from water and wastewater utilities. Now, one of the things that we have taken issue with is, while we have the second lowest kind of utility rate in the state for cities our size, one of the things that we have a concern about is we've had to increase that utility rate. We've had to increase it over the past few years. We'll have to continue to increase it in order to be able to meet the demands of the improvements needed especially for our wastewater system. And that is somewhat a little unnerving to us, because our structure that we want to, or for increasing rates on the utility side, is now being mandated and demanded by the EPA versus us determining what that schedule is going to be. So we've had to go with a more aggressive schedule for increasing rates, as we probably will have to for the next couple of years as well, because of their requirements to get it done under a very aggressive schedule for completion of the wastewater collection system improvements. And so this is something to where, while council and staff have been in agreement that improvements need to be made, we need to work towards those improvements. The rate and schedule of those improvements is now being dictated by the EPA, and thus the aggressiveness of those rate increases, which we would have probably had a much more gradual rate increase, had to kind of go over a longer period of time, a little bit slower, but we don't have that option with the EPA and their mandate.
So let's talk about a few things that the EPA brought up in their press release to the community. One of the things that they mentioned were specific diseases. Can you tell me, was their health ever at risk?
No. It was the press release that the EPA sent out was very irresponsible. The health of residents were never at risk. And in fact, one of the things that I think kind of exposes their hypocrisy is this has been going on, like I said, for over a decade. And so if the health of residents were ever truly at risk over a decade period, I would hope and pray that the EPA would actually step in to either shut down said system or take over the operation of it. Considering those two things were never on the table, they never wanted to either take over our system or shut down our system. They were just looking at seeing how they could possibly get some type of fine from the city, as well as trying to get improvements to the collection system. I think goes to show that the concern about the health of residents was never on the table or never a true concern. That seems to be boilerplate language that they had as part of their press release that they just kind of shoved in there regardless of the community. And so the issues and diseases that they brought up have never been an issue here in Tyler. And We take that very seriously and want to make sure that our citizens know that their health was never at risk, and to make sure, because they also included the word water at one point in their press release, which again goes towards that irresponsibility. The water system is different than the wastewater system, and the water system was definitely never, ever, ever at risk in relationship to the things we're working on with a consent decree. To go a little bit further, though, I also want to talk about, since I've able to talk a little bit about the press release, they also mentioned about low-income areas seem to be targeted. That is complete and utter nonsense. If you look at the map that shows kind of some of the areas where we had different overflows, different issues, you'll see that spread throughout the full community. We had, as far as upper income areas, in fact, some of the areas that we've had where probably the more concern have been in some of the older kind of middle income neighborhoods versus anything else. And so the idea that one area was left negligent, or that we kind of ignored, that we didn't do anything about, that really is that's something that we took almost as a bit of a slap in the face, and we consider a very unjust statement for them to make.
Did the EPA, did they ever come to Tyler? How often did they come here?
You know, and I can only speak really to the couple of years that I've been here. I've never really asked the staff if EPA had been here before. But EPA dealt with everything by phone call. It was phone calls with attorneys, not even people who were actually probably trained in environmental protection. It was attorneys for the EPA that we've been in negotiation with for all of these different years, kind of arguing different facts, arguing different issues. And so there is never truly an EPA presence here in Tyler towards this issue. As I mentioned, we've worked with TCEQ. TCEQ actually has a very good, strong presence here. We have a very good relationship with our local TCEQ group. But the EPA itself had no true presence here in this community.
And I think that so often when we talk about community issues, and especially issues relating to infrastructure, fines and fees, it can be tempting or sometimes we forget that the employees of the city and those working on these issues, those dealing with it, we all live in this community. Like, I'm a payer on the wastewater system. I'm a part owner, and that's kind of the beauty of it. We're all part of the system. We all have a responsibility to it. So if you would speak to that.
You know, the utility system, which celebrated its 100th anniversary last year, is owned by the citizens of Tyler. We all are really, as far as investors and owners of the city's utility system. One of the things that I have to do and be conscious of is when we make increases for the utility bills, I have to explain that to my wife. I have to let her know that, especially as she handles a lot of our bills, is that she's going to have to be paying more for water or wastewater services. And so we have to be very conscious of not only of how it impacts our neighbors, of how it impacts our friends and the other people that live here in Tyler, but it impacts, like I said, our spouses and our families. And so it's something that we take very seriously. It is something that we definitely do not do lightly, and it is one that we take this business, and it is a business. We take our utility business very much as a business, making sure we make very good decisions. It's important for the residents and our customers of our utility system to understand that we're all truly involved in this. We're going to be doing lots of improvements. We are going to be, increasing our televising of the line schedule as far as flushing the lines, really cleaning them out. Like I mentioned earlier, the right-of-way and a lot of the other maintenance that goes along with these, generators at lift stations. These are all things that are going to be coming, and a lot of it's going to be paid for out of the utility system by our customers. But there's also a role for our customers. One is be careful what you pour down the drain, because that then becomes something that becomes an issue for us later. And the second part is continue to be informed. know what's going on and kind of follow us on that. We've got, of course, our different social media in our Facebook, Twitter, that you can kind of go to and get linked to and find out more information as we do a lot of these projects. But other things that we're working on is we have a website that is kind of focused on our capital improvement program, but has a lot of our utility work that we're going to be doing in relationship to this. That will all be featured as part of that website. So stay informed, stay knowledgeable, and we will do our best to make sure that we get that information out to you. And so for that, we kind of, we share in this kind of responsibility for this community together. And so we are excited to kind of to work with our residents on this issue, even though we're not necessarily thrilled on the fact that we're having to deal with the EPA on it.
For more information on this issue, you can visit the City of Tyler's website, www.cityoftyler.org. You can also follow us on Facebook and Twitter. We're posting updates regularly. And you can always write in, call us, let us know your concerns, and we will do our best to address them.